Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I have a powerful and thought-provoking story for you. One that will change the way you see beauty, self-worth, and kindness. But before we dive in, let me ask you a few questions. Have you ever felt like you weren't good enough? Have you ever wished you could change something about yourself to fit in or to be accepted? And more importantly, what if you were given the power to become the person you always wanted to be? What would you do with it? These are the kind of questions Sandra, the main character of her story, had to face. And her journey will take you on an emotional roller coaster from pain and rejection to confidence, revenge, and ultimately self-discovery. But let's not rush ahead. I want you to really think about something as we go through this story. What does true beauty mean to you? Is it about how you look? Or is it something deeper? By the time we reach the end, you will see beauty in a whole new way. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's begin the story of 336 hours of beauty. These were the girls who were considered the most beautiful in the school, and their confidence filled the room. Sandra stood in the midst of the students of North High College. Her head bowed in shame. The echoes of the girls behind her, their mocking laughter and jeers rang cruelly in her ears. Moments earlier, she had raised her hand to call for the head teacher's attention as he addressed the assembly. She desperately needed to excuse herself, but the head teacher had totally ignored her. After all, who cared about the fat, ugly student? Sandra's weak bladder betrayed her. Warm liquid seeped down her legs. All eyes turned to her as Sandra peed herself. The moment the boys noticed, their whispers turned into uncontrollable laughter. Soon, the entire assembly erupted in cruel mockery. Sandra felt the ground beneath her feet shift as though it threatened to swallow her whole. She wished it would. Tears streamed down her face as she turned and fled, seeking refuge in an empty classroom. There, she collapsed into a desk, sobbing uncontrollably. Life had always been unkind to her. She had been born with a weak bladder, a condition that had plagued her with humiliation since childhood. On top of that, she was fat, poor, and by the cruel judgment of her peers, the ugliest girl in school. Unlike her classmates who all had boyfriends to call their own, Sandra had never experienced the thrill of a boy's affection or the joy of a friend's companionship. "Why did you make me like this, God?" she whispered through her tears. Her hands trembled as she buried her face in them. Sandra's heart ached as she listed her grievance against life. It felt as though every curse had been heaped upon her, and she could see no escape. The door creaked open, startling Sandra. She quickly wiped her tears, but it was too late. Miss Susan, a literature teacher, entered and approached her gently. "Sandra," Miss Susan said softly, pulling up a chair. "Don't cry, dear. Those students, they are the ones who should be ashamed, not you." Miss Susan had always been different. She was the one person in the school who didn't judge Sandra for her appearance. She saw something in Sandra that others didn't. With a warm smile, Miss Susan handed Sandra a handkerchief. "I have something that might cheer you up," she said. "I nominated you to compete in the school's end-of-year pageant." Sandra's head shot up in shock. "Me?" she stammered, unable to hide the mixture of disbelief and hope in her voice. "But why?" "Because you are beautiful, Sandra," Miss Susan replied firmly. "And you are worthy of competing, just like anyone else. You have a kind heart and a brilliant mind, and that makes you more than enough." For the first time in what felt like forever, Sandra felt a flicker of hope. Miss Susan's words wrapped around her like a warm blanket, shielding her from the harsh cold of the world. She nodded hesitantly, a small smile breaking through a tear-streaked face. Deep down, she had always dreamed of being part of something as special as the pageant, even if she had never admitted it to anyone, not even herself. Later that day, bolstered by Miss Susan's encouragement, Sandra walked into the school hall, where the other contestants were rehearsing. These were the girls who were considered the most beautiful in the school, and their confidence filled the room. Sandra's hand trembled as she approached the arts teacher. Her heart pounded. but she steadied herself and spoke up. "I'm here to join the practice," she said, her voice wavering but resolute. The room felt silent. Every pair of eyes turned to her, wide with shock. Among them was Beatrice, the queen bee of their class, the one everyone knew was going to win the competition, the dream girl. Beatrice immediately strode forward to the spot where Sandra was standing, her expression a mix of irritation and disdain. "Who asked you to be here?" Beatrice sneered, her voice dripping with mockery. Sandra swallowed hard, willing herself not to cry. "I was voted in," she said quietly. "My name is on the list." Beatrice's eyes narrowed as she marched over to the art teacher, who had just walked away from Sandra. She grabbed the list of contestants from the teacher. After a quick glance, Beatrice's face darkened. Sandra's name was indeed there. With a cold smile, Beatrice walked back towards Sandra, still standing at the entrance of the hall. She tore the list to shreds before her, letting the pieces flutter to the floor like confetti. Sandra's heart sank. She stared in horror at the fragments of paper scattered around her feet. "Well," Beatrice whispered venomously, leaning in close. "Now your name isn't on the list anymore." The art teacher turned away, feigning ignorance. The pageant was the biggest event of the entire school, and Sandra's presence in the competition was clearly unwelcome. No one was willing to stand up for her. "You can leave now," Beatrice said with a smirk. "Trust me, I am doing you a favor. No one wants to see that face on stage." Laughter erupted around the room. The other girls whispered amongst themselves, their mocking comments piercing Sandra like daggers. Her vision blurred with tears as she turned and ran from the hall, their laughter echoing in her ears as she fled. Sandra's heart felt like it had been shattered into a million pieces. Beatrice's words played in her mind, each one a reminder of her deepest insecurities. She had always known Beatrice despised her, perhaps out of jealousy for her intelligence, but Sandra had never imagined that Beatrice's hatred could manifest in such a cruel and public humiliation. Beatrice's hurtful words echoed relentlessly in Sandra's mind as she sprinted home, her heart heavy with pain. The cruel tones replayed like a haunting melody, each note piercing deeper into her soul. As she neared the familiar corner where the old mad woman sat, a figure Sandra had faithfully shared bread with every day after school, she paused, hesitating for a moment. Despite her turmoil, compassion compelled her to stop and offer the old woman her daily share of kindness. The frail figure sat cross-legged on the ground, her grey hair tangled and matted, her eyes distant yet knowing. Sandra extended the bread silently, hoping to leave quickly before her tears betrayed her. But today was different. "Why do you cry, my child?" The old woman's voice was raspy, but surprisingly steady. Sandra froze, startled. The mad woman had never spoken before. Her words carried a strange weight, as though they bore secrets far beyond her ragged appearance. "Life has been unfair to me," Sandra blurted out, her voice quivering. "Everyone mocks me because I was born ugly. No one wants me." The old woman's eyes softened with an unexplainable depth of understanding. "Make one wish, and I will grant it to you," she said gently. Sandra's eyes fluttered open in shock. Was this a joke, or was the woman speaking out of her illness? How could an old mad woman grant her wish? "Why do you doubt me, child?" the woman asked. "I hear your thoughts, but this is my gift to you for your kindness. Every day you feed me when others pass by without a glance. Speak your wish, and it will be yours." Reluctantly, Sandra agreed, though her heart was filled with doubt. Just to humor the mad woman and be done with it, she closed her eyes and said, "I wish to be the most beautiful girl in the world." When Sandra opened her eyes, the mad woman was still sitting before her, her lips curling into a mysterious smile, but nothing had changed. Of course, she knew it was a prank. Sandra sighed and shook her head. The old woman then said to her, "According to your wish, you have been granted 336 hours to be beautiful." Sandra scoffed, almost laughing at the craziness of it. "Thank you, Mama," she said with a small smile. humoring the woman. She handed her the bread as always. Remember to eat, and please cover yourself with sheets at night. It gets cold. As she turned to leave, the woman's voice echoed behind her. 336 hours to live your dream, my child. It is not a very long time. Use it wisely. Sandra shook her head. This mama is so funny, she muttered to herself. At least the old woman had managed to make her laugh and momentarily forget her trouble. That night, Sandra went straight to bed, carrying her sorrows with her. But when she woke up the next morning, she felt different, lighter somehow. Curious, she walked up to her mirror, sensing something strange. But when she reached it, Sandra almost fled from her own reflection. The girl staring back at her wasn't Sandra. Her breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. Her reflection was radiant, ethereal, every feature perfectly sculpted. For a moment, Sandra didn't recognize herself. Then the mad woman's words rushed back to her. 336 hours. The impossibility of it all made Sandra feel dizzy. Questions swirled in her mind. She wanted to go back and ask the old woman what she had done, but the old woman's parting words echoed louder than her doubts. Her time had already begun to tick. Sandra made a choice. She would not waste this fleeting gift. The world had mocked her for so long, now it would bow before her. With resolve burning in her chest, Sandra vowed to use her beauty to take revenge on every single soul who had ever made her feel less than human. And her first target, Beatrice. That morning, as Sandra walked into North High College, the halls fell silent. Every head turned to her. The students' eyes widened with astonishment. Sandra's presence commanded attention like nothing the school had ever seen. Whispers filled the air. Who is that new student? The girls looked at her with a mixture of jealousy and admiration, while the boys, the very same one who used to mock her, tripped over themselves for a chance to speak to her. Sandra didn't spare them a glance. She had one goal, Beatrice. As Sandra stepped into her classroom, the shatter stopped abruptly. All eyes were on her. Boys scrambled to dust the seat she chose, their eagerness almost comical. Sandra carried herself with quiet confidence, unbothered by the frenzy she cursed, but from across the room, Beatrice watched intently, her brow furrowed. Who was this girl? Her aura was magnetic, her beauty unparalleled. Beatrice's throne as the school's queen bee suddenly felt unstable. During class, Sandra answered every question with confidence, outshining everyone. By the end of the lesson, Beatrice had made up her mind. This girl wasn't an enemy to conquer. She was an ally to recruit. A smirk played on Beatrice's lips as she decided to approach her. If you can't beat her, make her one of your own. No one in the classroom noticed Sandra's absence from school the previous day, nor did anyone question the mysterious arrival of the stunning new student. During break time, Sandra introduced herself with practiced ease. I'm Jane, the new girl, she said with a smile, masking her true identity and feigning innocence. Beatrice's eyes lit up with satisfaction. Welcome, Jane. Why don't you come join my clique? We will have so much fun before finals. Sandra gave a small, polite nod, but as they walked together, she couldn't help the cruel smirk that tugged at the corners of her lips. If only Beatrice knew the truth, that the girl she now eagerly welcomed was the same ugly, fat girl she had tormented relentlessly. The thoughts made Sandra laugh inwardly. Beatrice had no idea what was coming. The next day marked the start of the final exams, a pivotal moment for all sixth grade students as it would determine who would graduate to North High College. The tension was palpable, and Sandra knew many of her classmates, including Beatrice, planned to cheat. This was the opportunity Sandra had been waiting for. Sitting alone in the classroom after everyone had left for break, Sandra began crafting a plan, the pieces of her revenge falling perfectly into place. Suddenly, a voice interrupted her thoughts. Hi, Jane. She turned to find Tony, Beatrice's boyfriend, standing before her. Sandra's breath caught, but she quickly composed herself. Tony, whom she had known since kindergarten, but who had never spoken a word to her in all their years of school, now stood there looking at her like she was the center of the universe. I noticed how you answered all the questions in class today, Tony said, his voice warm with admiration. You are really smart. Sandra's heart raced, but her voice remained steady. Jane. The name's Jane. Tony grinned. Why did you transfer here for final? Sandra thought fast. North High College is my dream school, she said, flashing a casual smile. I had to be here to take the entry exam. Tony nodded, satisfied with her explanation. That brief conversation marked the start of a secret friendship, one that Sandra knew she could use to her advantage. She wasn't going to destroy Beatrice. She was going to take everything she held dear, including Tony. The next day, the exams began. For Sandra, passing was effortless. She had always been brilliant, even if no one had ever noticed before. But as expected, the other students resorted to cheating. Some scribbled answers on their palms, others on scraps of paper tucked into creative hiding spots. Sandra's focus, however, was on Beatrice. In the girls' washroom, Beatrice proudly showed Sandra the test answers she had written on a sheet of paper. Sandra watched as Beatrice slipped the cheat sheet into her bra. No one will ever check here, Beatrice said with a sly smile. You are so smart, Jane replied, forcing a grin. They laughed together and Sandra followed Beatrice back into the exam hall. Everyone took their seats and the exam began. After a while, Sandra walked calmly to the invigilator and whispered something in her ear. Moments later, teacher called Beatrice to the front of the class. Beatrice, please step forward. The teacher stared sternly. Beatrice's face turned pale. What's wrong? She asked, trying to sound innocent. We have received information that you are carrying unauthorized materials, the teacher announced. Beatrice denied it vehemently, but when the teacher reached into her shirt, she pulled out the cheat sheet. Gaps filled the room. Go and report yourself to the head teacher, the invigilator said, handing Beatrice the damning evidence. Beatrice's fate was sealed. Cheating was a serious offense at North High, and Beatrice's punishment was harsh. She would be held back a year to repeat 6th grade. Unable to graduate with her classmates, she was immediately sent home that day. Sandra's satisfaction was unmatched, and she completed her exams with a triumphant smile. At the end of the exam week, Beatrice cornered Jane in the girls' washroom. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. I trusted you, she shouted, her voice trembling with anger. How could you betray me like that? My dad collapsed when he heard what had happened. He is in the hospital because of this. Don't you have a heart? Sandra scoffed, her expression cold and unbothered. A heart? She repeated mockingly. I only did what was right, which is something I presume you wouldn't know anything about. Sandra paused, letting her words sink in. Oh, and Tony asked me out. Beatrice staggered back, her tears flowing freely. Why? Why are you doing this? She whispered. Sandra leaned in, her voice low and venomous. You did worse, she said, her eyes flashing with anger. To those you thought were beneath you. She straightened herself, her tone icy. Now you know how it feels. Sandra turned to leave but stopped at the doorway. Oh, and let's see how you will win this year's competition. I'm pretty sure no one would want to see the face of a repeat student on stage. With that, she walked out. Beatrice stood frozen, her own words ringing in her head. A million thoughts ran through her mind. The competition, the girl who was Jane, and the girl she was talking about. As the days passed, Sandra's transformation brought unimaginable joy. Tony became her boyfriend and the school adored her. She basked in the attention, joining the pageant competition with Beatrice out of the way. But in her newfound glory, Sandra forgot the one who had made it all possible. Going home with Tony every day, she no longer walked the road where the old mad woman sat. Her past and the kindness she once showed were left behind, replaced by a thirst for revenge and a hunger for admiration. Sandra had forgotten one crucial thing. Her time was running out, and the dream she was living wouldn't last forever. The day of the competition finally arrived, and Sandra was dominating. She led the scoreboard with a significant gap against her competitors. It was almost certain she would emerge as the winner and claim the title of the most beautiful girl in North High. Then came the final round, where each contestant had to answer a question. When Sandra's turn arrived, the moderator asked, "Can you define beauty? What does it truly mean to you?" The room fell silent. All eyes were on her. Sandra stood frozen. Her confidence evaporated. To everyone's shock, including her own, she couldn't answer. For all her outward beauty, she had never considered the essence of true beauty. As the weight of the moment sank in, Sandra realized two things. First, in her quest for revenge, she had abandoned empathy and neglected the values that once mattered. Second, she had become the very person she sought to defeat, Beatrice. Sandra didn't know what beauty truly was because she had strayed too far from her own truth. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at the crowd, dropped the microphone and walked off the stage. Gasps echoed through the hall, but Sandra didn't care. She knew exactly where she needed to go. Sandra went straight to Beatrice's house. Beatrice was sitting outside, tears streaming down her face as she worried over her hospitalized father. Sandra greeted her softly. She was sorry for everything. "Beatrice," she said, regret heavy in her voice. "I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant to cause you and your family so much pain." To her surprise, Beatrice nodded. Her voice trembled. "It's not really your fault, Jane. I've been a bad student and a terrible person. I was proud and reckless, and I never should have cheated. All my dad ever wanted was for me to do well and be better. I failed him." Sandra looked at Beatrice, her eyes brimming with understanding. "I understand," she said softly. "I have made many mistakes too, and I'm truly sorry for everything." Beatrice looked at her with weary eyes. "If you ever see that girl Sandra again," she whispered, "please tell her that I am sorry." Tears welled up in Sandra's eyes. "She will hear," Jane replied. The two girls embraced, finding solace in each other's repentance. Together, they visited Beatrice's father in the hospital, bringing him gifts and spending hours laughing and talking. At the end of the day, Beatrice's father called Sandra aside. "Thank you, Jane," he said softly, his voice full of gratitude, "for helping Beatrice." Sandra was moved beyond words. She held his hands tightly. "I'm the one who's grateful, sir. Her forgiveness and kind heart given me a chance to make things right." When Sandra left the hospital, she ran straight to the old woman. With tears in her eyes, she hugged her. "Mama, please forgive me for staying away so long. I forgot about you and all that you did for me." She handed the old woman a loaf of bread, just as she used to. The old woman looked at Sandra with a knowing smile. "Child, did you learn any lesson from being beautiful?" Sandra sat beside her, a heart full of humility. "Yes, Mama," she replied. "I learned that without the beauty of the heart, outward beauty is nothing but a mask. True beauty is the light that shines on the inside. It is a heart that feels, that is kind, that gives, and that loves unconditionally. That is what true beauty is." The old woman's eyes sparkled. "Your 336 hours are over. My child, you have earned the right to stay beautiful forever." But Sandra shook her head. "No, Mama, the person I need to fight for is not Jane, the girl on the outside, but Sandra, the one inside. I want to see myself again." The old woman was taken aback. "If you reject this gift, there is no going back," she warned. Sandra smiled. "I should have loved Sandra from the beginning. I want to be me again." The old woman granted Sandra's wish. Her smile tinged with pride. The next day, Sandra stood before her mirror. For the first time, she didn't despise her reflection. She saw her true self, intelligent, funny, and compassionate, and she was proud of who she was becoming. At the graduation ceremony, Sandra walked in as herself, unshaken and self-assured. After the event, she approached Tony. "It's over," she said simply. Then she walked away. Tony stood frozen, confused. Where had Sandra come from? And why in the world had she just broken up with him? He had been trying to reach Jane on the phone, but she hadn't been taking his calls. Now this? Tony was heartbroken. And now Sandra. He shook his head. She must be going mad. As he walked away, he pulled out his phone and dialed Jane's number once more. Inside the hall, as the ceremony concluded, Sandra sat under a tree in the school garden. Suddenly, Johnny walked up to her. Johnny had been her classmate, the quiet boy who barely spoke in class and always kept to himself. "Hello, Sandra," Johnny said. Sandra's eyes widened. "He knows my real name? I wanted to ask if we could go on a date together," he continued. Sandra was shocked. "A date? But I barely know you," she replied. "Don't worry about that," Johnny said with a small smile. "I've known you for a long time. Every day from my driver's car, I watched you give that old woman food. Since then, I have secretly admired you. I was only waiting for the right moment. And now that we're done with school, I think this is the best time to ask you, will you be my girlfriend?" Sandra couldn't find the words to say. Here was a guy, a rich, handsome guy, asking her out. Not because she was Jane, but because she was Sandra. She could not believe it. But it wasn't Johnny's wealth or good looks that made her heart flutter. It was his heart. Sandra smiled. "I will think about it," she said. "But first, I will honor your date because you asked so politely." They both laughed, and Johnny ushered Sandra into his driver's car, waiting for them. As they walked towards the car, Sandra reflected on her life and all she had experienced in the past few weeks. She realized something. God had never been unfair in the way he made her. She had never truly had a problem. The only problem she ever had was not knowing her worth. Sandra didn't mind having a weak bladder anymore. The more her mind was strengthened, the more she was in control of her body. Even her weak bladder, her own mind had caused her healing. Now she had found love, peace, and the fulfillment of changing someone else's life. Her joy was full. "I am a beautiful girl," Sandra muttered to herself with a smile. With a prospective boyfriend and a strong bladder, she was finally whole. Her heart was mended. Her spirit was free. Wow. What a journey. Sandra went from being mocked and humiliated to becoming the most admired girl in school. But in the end, she realized something powerful. Her true worth had nothing to do with her looks. It was always inside her. Here are some key lessons to learn from this story. 1. True beauty isn't about appearances. It's about kindness, self-respect, and how we treat others. 2. Revenge might feel good in the moment, but it never truly heals us. Sandra thought she wanted payback, but it only left her feeling empty. 3. Confidence and self-worth comes from within. No magic wish or transformation can replace the power of knowing your own value. 4. Kindness is never wasted. The one person Sandra showed kindness to, the mad woman, was the one who changed her life. So now, I have a question for you. If you were given 336 hours to be your perfect self, what would you do differently? Would you use it for revenge, to prove a point, or to uplift yourself and others? Let's talk about this in the comment section. I would love to hear your thoughts on this story. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss another great story. Until next time, stay kind, stay true, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.